Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this meeting of the Corporate Services Climate Change and Scrutiny Management Committee. Welcome members and guests. Just a few housekeeping points. We're not expecting a fire alarm this evening. If the alarm does go off, then please follow us through the marked fire exits. If anybody needs to use the facilities at any point, the toilets are just behind me. Just go through that door to my left. I'll begin with apologies. I've received apologies from Councillor Eyre and Councillor Kelly. Councillor Eyre is substituted by Councillor One, and Councillor Kelly is substituted by Councillor Clark. Welcome. Next agenda item, declarations of interest. Do any members have any interest that they would like to declare relating to items on today's agenda? Nope. Thank you. Next item is the minutes of the meeting held on the 22nd of April. Councillor Merritt.
Yes, just one small issue on minute 46. Regarding the representations from Mr. Beacon. It says he raised concerns regarding large consumer areas. I don't think those were quite the words he used. I think he was concerned about high consumption areas rather than.
Well, this is his
yes.
Bishopthorpe, Cotmanthorpe, Woodthorpe
yes.
statement.
Large consumer areas might refer to Monk's Cross or the city centre.
Yes. Yeah, I wasn't entirely sure what he was
slightly different take.
Okay, well, I'm sure we can consumption. Okay. Thank you for that. Do any of the members have any other matters of accuracy in the minutes? No. Thank you very much. Agenda item 3, public participation. We don't have any registered public speakers today. Which takes us on to the next agenda item, item 4, 10-year strategies. And I'm pleased that we're joined by officers and council leader. So if you would like to come and join us at the table, please. There should be some name plates for you to divvy up. So obviously our officers can introduce the paper, but the committee factored into its work programme a review of the 10-year strategies, a stock take really to see where we are with progress towards implementation. Obviously, since the strategies were agreed, there's a new council plan, and the paper sets out a sort of a mapping of the council plan priorities against the previously agreed 10-year strategy documents. So I shall hand over to officers and the council leader to make any introductory remarks that you wish.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm Claire Fole, Assistant Director of Policy and Strategy. And if I just introduce my colleagues, Catherine.
Yeah, Catherine Daly, Head of City Development.
And Sean Gibbons, Head of Carbon Reduction.
And we're here today to present to you a 10-year strategies stock take. Sorry, I'm going to have to take my glasses between my notes. We're sharing the decisions that have led to the strategy and policy framework being adopted in 2022. We're setting out the York 2032 priorities and vision that was co-designed by city partners and adopted on behalf of the city by full council also in 2022, together with the 10-year strategies that were approved by council also in 2022. The York 2032 vision was set out drawing on climate change from Sean, the joint health and wellbeing strategy and the economic development strategy via Catherine, and takes a sustainable development approach to how our city can develop. Other city strategies were informed these, so the skills strategy and the culture strategy had already been approved and they informed the development of climate change, joint health and wellbeing and economic, or other strategies are being informed by the 10-year strategies, including the tourism strategy that was recently approved and the emerging local transport strategy. The report shows how this council plan takes a staged approach to deliver the York 2032 vision with a table mapping ambition to priorities and detailing how the 4 core commitments of equalities, affordability, climate and health resonate through each of the 10-year strategies. The report shares highlights of each of the three core strategies, the governance arrangements for those strategies, and sets out how we're going to measure performance over the years ahead. Thank you.
Thank you. So, members, the recommendation that comes with this report is we're asked to note the information shared and provide feedback to assist in shaping future development. And the reason for that recommendation is that we as a committee have responsibility for monitoring progress of relevant council priorities. You'll know from reading the report that, particularly in relation to health and wellbeing and economic strategy, looking at the detail of delivery of some of those priorities will sit with the relevant scrutiny committees. And I'm sure that the chairs of those committees, who we helpfully have here this evening, will be wanting to factor that into their plans going forward. Obviously, climate change sits within the remit of this committee, and it's something that we will want to factor into our plans for the coming year, as we seek to do justice to that part of our remit. We have presented as part of this report. I suppose it looks like sort of the beginnings of a suite of dashboards in terms of monitoring progress, which presentationally looks very similar to the information we'd normally receive with finance and performance monitors. And it may be that members have some feedback on how that information is presented and perhaps ways in which they, any ideas they may have for how that information could be presented or cut in a different way going forward. But with that, I will invite members to make any comments, any suggestions, any feedback on what we've been, what's been shared with us in terms of progress with the delivery of those strategies. Councillor Burton. To put your microphone.
Quick question was the 10 years scorecards, and they're going to go online, I believe, in June, and I wondered if that was going to plan.
Yeah, that's correct. So we're planning to publish them annually on the open data platform. That's correct.
Yeah.
Thank you. I know the report mentioned some of the data that feeds into the scorecards. Some of that data, there is a considerable time lag, which obviously isn't an issue of our making. I just wondered how much of an issue that might be in terms of our ability to monitor where we are and to adapt our approach if we do have a lack of robust data available to us. I'm guessing, particularly on the climate change front, that may be something that is a particular issue. I just wondered if there was any ways in which that can be kind of worked around, or alternative data sources identified that would give us an indication as to how we were doing.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think that's particularly relevant for citywide carbon emissions, which of the climate change 10-year scorecard annex a reference GCC02, the top of page 3 of that annex. And that's the big number that we're most interested in tracking against our citywide net zero ambition. And that number is subject to national data sets. As we explained, it is subject to significant time lags. The latest data that we have available for that indicator relates to 2020, and that's in the scorecards there. But all of the other indicators are more up to date than that. That's why we've identified other indicators as proxy indicators towards our net zero ambition, and we're tracking those other indicators far more regularly and have more control over the frequency at which that data is captured.
Thank you, Sean. Councillor Taylor.
Thanks, Chair. Question I've got, and it's a pretty broad one, but I'm always curious with these things as to how much grip they have on the things that actually happen on the ground. And I wondered if for any of the three main strategies, you could share examples of things that the council has chosen not to do or changed as a result of the strategic priorities. Just it might make it a bit more real. I know there's scorecards and indicators, but these things are so big, they can sometimes say almost everything. So it'd be good to get an example of that internal steer in response to what we're working to. Thanks.
So the emerging local transport strategy is entirely rooted in the climate change strategy. So it's setting out to develop a strategy that will, over time, reduce transport by 20%. So that's 1 out of every 5 journeys, if you like, and reduce carbon emissions by 71%. And recently, Executive had a paper where the local transport strategy consultation policies that were tested with the residents came to them to ask for acceptance around those policies to best understand how residents' appetite around changing their behaviour to achieve those emissions. That's one example.
I think probably the thing to say on the economic strategy is just the recognition that it's obviously not a council strategy, it's a citywide strategy. So I think where we focused our efforts to date is working with the York Economic Partnership, and they're helping us to identify the priorities to take forward. Because as you say, the strategy is broad because it's the economy, so it's broad. So in recognition, obviously, of financial restraints and resource restraints, not just for us, but for all organisations, it's really important that we work closely in partnership to define the role of the council, the role of the FSB, the role of the new combined authority, etc. And I think that's a really important point moving forward for these strategies, is how we work collaboratively to deliver them.
Yeah. Councillor Douglas.
Can I just say something else on the economic strategy as well? I think what Catherine's just described, that it's a citywide approach, it's actually helped us to identify what those economic areas are that we want to develop. And obviously there's a way of the city has gone through a process of saying, yes, we do want to develop that. Industry and rail tech would likely be one of those examples, but we've decided not to focus on another area because, of course, you know, we need to make sure that we've got that focus so that we can come forward with investable projects and support the industries that we know that are coming through that will provide good quality jobs, secure jobs in the longer term, and particularly when we've got so many development opportunities. And York Central will be a good example of that, wouldn't it? What we do and don't want to put onto York Central. This really does help to influence that.
Thank you. Sean, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, echo Catherine's point. The climate change strategy is a strategy for the city as a whole, but we are taking steps to get our own house in order, and some of the indicators on here, we're taking actions to directly address those. So we've had over 30 heat decarbonisation plans completed for council-owned corporate sites, but also for the council schools, and that will have a direct impact on reducing the electricity and gas consumption of those buildings. We continue to work with Solar for Schools to provide free solar installations for our maintained schools, and we're seeing a trickle of those being installed, again reducing the electricity consumption associated with those buildings. the retrofit, the housing retrofit action plan is directly linked to the climate change strategy, and we're taking actions to improve the energy performance rating of housing stock across the city, not just council owned, but all of the housing stock. And the establishment of the retrofit one-stop shop for York will continue to improve the EPC rating of houses across York.
Thank you. Claire?
Yeah, I'm also representing Peter Roderick, not particularly well, but the Director of Public Health can't join us tonight, so apologies. The Joint Health and Wellbeing Strategy has been used as a opportunity. It was co-designed with the Community and Health and Care Services, and it's been used as an opportunity to have kind of a more mature discussion with the Integrated Care Board around how the Integrated Care Board can help and work through and with health services across the city. It provides a kind of common framework that everyone can use. So similar to the economic strategy, it's about how we work in partnership and all of our partners working together to achieve the same ambitions.
Okay, Councillor Rowley.
Thank you, Chair. So just a couple of points, really. Thank you for what you are doing. I appreciate, obviously, this was kind of initiated 2 years ago. And you've talked about economic development, and I'm sure you will be having discussions with the newly elected Labour Mayor for York and North Yorkshire. So clearly, any ongoing discussions with him and any agreements and partnerships, would be good to get the feedback on those. And then the other point really was about the transport policy. And we hear a lot about the reduction of cars and getting people out of cars and onto public transport and what have you. And I've looked a lot at how best to do this. But one area that I've not seen, and I may well have missed it, is yes, we want to reduce the use of cars, but given the nature of our city and the urban areas, we're not going to, do that kind of overnight. So it's almost a rhetorical question, really. So within your planning, I have not seen anything that has an initiative for car sharing or to increase and introduce the benefits of car sharing, particularly from the rural areas. So, in terms of giving you some feedback as you move forward, I think that would be a piece of work that potentially you could do, which, could be quite positive. Yeah, I think of bus lanes, taxi lanes, potentially could have those open for multiple occupancy cars, or just anything like that during particular hours. So it was, thank you for what you're doing. Well done. Keep up the good work. It was just those 2 points, really. Thank you, Chair.
No, thank you. Who would like to have a go at that?
I'll have a go first and then Sean will come in. So on the transport side, the consultation was out over the winter period, and the response has come back with that for policy areas to consider, and looking at more sustainable forms of transport, and also making sure that outer areas are still connected into the city is hugely important. So the next stage of that, taking the consultation results, is to turn it into some suggested and possible solutions to that. And so that work's currently ongoing, isn't it? And the other thing that's ongoing as well is that the transport strategies for York and North Yorkshire are coming together to try and marry them together in something, and in fact it's very close to completion, that can be presented to the Mayor, because that is going to be a huge part of the Mayor's role as well for York and North Yorkshire. And so it's all ongoing, and these strategies that you have in front here don't necessarily reflect those things that have happened over the past year, perhaps, in that respect. Is that fair? They're not included in the detail. They've kind of come afterwards as actions. But it is, and everything's on the table, essentially. We're open to all ideas, so keep the ideas coming, please do.
Sean, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, thank you for the feedback on the specifics about the car club and car sharing. Expanding the current enterprise car club that the city operates is a current action on the climate change action plan at the moment, and ways that we do that on the ground is by promoting that car club at events that we're at, and also trying to identify additional parking bays where one of those cars might be able to be located. So it is an action that we're trying to increase. But thanks for the feedback.
Thank you. Had a question around the sort of review and where appropriate updating of the strategies. There was I think a mention made on paragraph 32 about a review of the the strategies in light of the new council plan. I just wondered what the timescale, the anticipated timescale was for a review, and whether it would be a wholesale review or whether that would be at the 5-year point. So just some idea of whether it's worth this committee having another discussion on refreshed strategies. That probably won't be necessary if it's tweaking rather than a wholesale rewrite.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So we're planning to update the 10-year plan. We always did plan to update it when the local transport strategy has been approved, because it's one of the pillars of the strategy and policy framework. Following the publication of the council plan, it's also clear that we haven't emphasised sufficiently the impact of poverty and deprivation across the city, and how that obviously drives some of our inequalities. And we'll take the advantage when we're updating it with the local transport strategy to look at the strategies to make sure we've got sufficient focus on how we can address some of the poverty impacts. We're also exploring how poverty-based factors can be brought together at a citywide scale through the 10-year, we're calling it a poverty-free strategy. We might call it something else, but essentially what can we do as a city and with city anchor institutions to really address some of the long-term system impacts on people's lives that lead them into either financial insecurity or health challenges. I think bringing it back would be a good idea. I haven't got a timescale for you just yet, so we're still waiting for the local transport strategy to be finalised. End of the year, I'm saying off the top of my head. Yeah. Would that work for you?
Yeah. Councillor Douglas.
Yeah, and I'd just like to add as well that we wanted to make sure that the strategies did reflect the equalities, affordability, climate and health priorities of the council, and also from our perspective, a bit more of a focus on housing and delivering of affordable housing as well, because I felt when I read them, coming into administration a year ago, that there wasn't sufficient focus on that, and it feeds into all of the elements that we've just spoken about.
Thank you. I think if the sort of significant new elements being added, it would be helpful. I'm sure members would appreciate having an opportunity to discuss those and put forward any ideas for to inform the development of that. But I'll leave it with you to come back to us as and when you're at a point where you think it'd be worth having that discussion. Councillor Widdowson.
I think the question probably is towards you, Sean. It's just in the round, when you're looking at the KPIs from the climate strategy, the car club one jumps out as a big one to be looking at, and to how we do things around there. But there's also the talk about panel. So if we're looking at the talk about panel, all the indicators are going in the wrong direction. And it's just, what are we looking at to do there so that people like the place that they live in, they think that we care. I know there was talk of neighbourhood caretakers. I don't know whether that's feeding into that. I don't know whether it's ward funding going into making sure that the place looks good. But where does that fit in the strategy at the moment? And if you can't answer it, just tell me you can't. We'll get back to it at another time.
I suppose it's open space management rather than climate change necessarily.
But it's the reason it's all been down under climate change is that's how people perceive our pride and the way that we look at it. And if we're interested, that's how.
Which page is that scorecard?
It's one of the annexes.
Yeah.
28. Okay.
It's an interesting question, because I think you're right. It's public perception of the city that people are in and the environment that surround them. I think some of the steps that we perhaps take to support climate change and promote biodiversity, like letting the verges grow a little bit longer and not mowing them, perhaps does have a negative impact on public perception of what we're doing around the city to support climate change. So it will be come back to the messaging and whether we're getting the messaging right around that and whether enough people are hearing the messaging about why we're taking those actions. And maybe given the indicators that we've got here, we could do more or perhaps take a slightly different approach to that messaging and how we're getting the messaging out.
Yeah, so if I just come back, how did you decide on these indicators? Because obviously, you know, that there are other indicators in terms of on the back of decisions made around open space management that I suppose could show a more complete picture. So was it a case of looking at available indicators, think, well, these ones would sit logically under this heading, therefore we'll put them in?
Yes.
Okay. No, which is fine. Yeah, I mean.
Can I just
Yeah.
add something in on that? I'm not too concerned about the messaging. My concern is that this is a group of interested people who have volunteered to be in the talk about panel. So they're already informed, they already know what's going on. We do a lot of messaging with them. What I'd like to understand is the numbers going in the wrong direction. So what is it that they're looking for? How are we building that into the strategy to understand what is their perception? What is their reality of why they don't? Reading those three, Sean, in simple terms, it looks like we don't care.
Yeah.
That's what is being fed back. And if that's the way that they're feeling, we're not going to get them to do other stuff.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I suppose we only have the quantitative data in front of us. We only know it's going in one direction, but we don't know qualitatively why people are saying that. And so there's another piece of work, I think, around that, talk about panel to understand why that is and try and change that direction.
I know we discussed a previous meeting of this committee, communication with residents and different channels and different types of messaging in terms of not exactly managing expectations, but communicating why things are done in a certain way. And I suppose that there may be a lag in terms of that feeding through, but there may not be, but we don't know. Yeah. No, it's an interesting point. Members have any other comments on the information we've seen? I appreciate this is the first time we've looked at this, and it's a really helpful introduction to how the delivery of the strategies will evolve and how it will be monitored. And I'm sure at the relevant scrutiny committees there'll be further feedback, which I'm sure you'll take into account. Councillor Widdowson.
Apologies, it was my last question. Just building on something that Chris Stewart said at the last meeting that we had, which was for, I think it was £800,000 of revenue a year, you could actually achieve all the different actions that you wanted to in the climate action plan. Is there any way of building that in or getting an update on that or having a look as to where it was going?
Which meeting was that?
That was the
It was
last.
the one that we held in the little room downstairs
Okay.
where all the windows had to be open. I can't remember.
Right, okay.
So it's about a month ago, wasn't it?
Yeah. So,
Okay.
yeah, Councillor Stewart set out a business case, didn't he, where he recognised that actually revenue from essentially accessing loans would give us an opportunity to meet, it was retrofit, I think, rather than all of the council plan actions, wasn't it?
No, it was all of it.
Was it all of it?
Well, it's the actions within the heat decarbonisation plan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That obviously will form part of our budget setting process. So right now we can't really talk about that, but at some point we'll need to come back to you and talk about budget setting and where we go with that.
Yeah. I mean, and we'll talk later under the work plan item about in the climate change sphere, whether there are any particular issues that we may want to focus on. But yeah, so this agenda item is really to take a more high level view as to strategically how the authority is progressing with delivery and monitoring. Any other comments before we we move on. Thank you very much for coming to talk to us and answer our questions. And we'll kind of be guided by you as to when you think it would be an appropriate time to come back for a further discussion, maybe on the back of some of the kind of evolving discussions on sort of future iterations. But you're happy to discuss this again. Thank you very much. Okay, members, we'll move on to the next agenda item, which is agenda item 5, council motions. So we received a report in November, which was, I think, the first report we'd had in a while, maybe a year. Looking at where we were with actions arising from motions approved by full council. There were quite a few gaps in that report, so we resolved to return to this issue to see to receive an update and to see how we were getting on with delivery of those actions arising. So this report, I set out paragraph 6, is provided for transparency purposes and is therefore for information only. What I propose to do, however, is run through the report really to note any actions that are for which we have no information, just so that we've noted that there are some items that for which we don't have a sense of what the likely actions will be. To be fair, most of those examples relate to motions that have been passed fairly recently, as in at the last council meeting. So it's not unreasonable that officers still are still deciding what the most relevant course of action is. I think one of the things that reading the report, it does highlight a bit of a gap in that quite often there are actions that are for members rather than officers, and they seem to fall down the cracks, as it were, and that's nobody's fault. That's just, we pass a motion and then we leave the meeting, and more often not, things do happen. But I think where there is a members should do or group leaders should do, at the moment we don't really have a mechanism for making sure that those happen. There's, I suppose, a separate discussion as to, well, where should responsibility sit? With the mood of the motion, or whether democratic services perhaps convene group leaders or invite group leaders to agree an action, and just to enable democratic services to be able to say, well, we know that either there's something has happened or something hasn't happened. I think at the moment we're in a position where we don't know what's happened, so we're assuming that nothing has happened. But that's that.
Yeah. And that might well not be the case.
Well, indeed, yeah.
So,
we don't know.
yeah, there are options with those. I
Yeah.
mean, if the committee felt like it, we could obviously pursue, occasionally group leaders do meet, I think every month now, Claire, I think, yeah. It could be a standing item, for instance, to just consider and touch base and check, with that. And there would be no harm in the committee putting forward a request of that nature. I think the other thing, just to add to what you've actually said, Chair, is we have actually revised the reporting format slightly in conjunction with yourself and the Vice Chair, in order to, shall we say, maximise the number of responses we're getting back from CMT. The process is a little bit simpler now. So I think you'll see when you're going through them that we have got a better completion rate this time round.
Yeah. Okay, what I propose to do is not have a line by line discussion of each, but just go page by page and just ask members if they would like to flag up any. I think we can take it as given where there's a gap, or an absence of actions taken or status that does need to be pursued, perhaps between myself and the Vice Chair, working with democratic services to see if there is a blockage or a lack of information forthcoming, that we can see what we can do to unblock that. But for most of the motions, action is ongoing. in many cases, it may not be the action may not be as quick as we would like it to be, but obviously there's there'll be other issues that officers are dealing with as well. So I'll start on page 39 if anybody has any comments on Councillor Rowley.
Thanks, Chair. Just a general comment, really. When you get a report like this and its status is ongoing, there's too many blank boxes with actions taken. So, you know, if something is ongoing, there's got to be something happening, and just a brief line as to what that happening is would be helpful. There's too many boxes that are empty. And just a general comment on the report. That was all. Thank you, Chair.
I think that's a that's a fair comment. I think there are fewer blank boxes this time round than there were in November. But I think it will take us a while to embed that. Yeah, and I think we need to be clear what our expectations are as a committee, in terms of having an assurance that a motion hasn't been simply ignored, but has been given due consideration.
Sorry, Jeff, but it's easy to ignore them. I'm not saying that it's happening, but it's easy to ignore a motion by having a blank box and saying ongoing.
Yeah, I mean,
So
I think
if something is ongoing, there has to
yeah.
be, to me, maybe I'm a bit too simplistic, but to me, if something is ongoing, there's got to be something in that actions box because it's ongoing for something. That was all.
Yeah, no, and I'll take page 39 as an example. There's a kind of quite helpful and descriptive action taken comment that begins with the sort of initial response and then provides an update in terms of some of the issues raised will be built into a customer strategy that seems to be in train. So that gives us an idea of, yes, the motion was a year and a half ago, but it hasn't just been forgotten. It's feeding into other pieces of work. Councillor Douglas.
Yeah, I think all of us sat here, we know that there isn't a formalised procedure for this, and there hasn't. And I think it's important that we do try and build something that is workable and isn't overly onerous as well, because that's the danger, isn't it? That it becomes a huge task for everybody. And there are some actions that are to do with executive or directors or the chief operating officer. And I'm just wondering if they could be broken down into those two groups. And so anything that's to do with group leaders comes to group leaders, as was suggested earlier. But then also executive and CMT, senior management team, have every other week meeting. And there could be a list of items on there because we've got in here which directors they need to go on, and we could discuss what needs to happen next in order to forward some of these motions. And I think the time frame for some might not, be increased as rapidly as we might like, but it would keep the process moving. And I think that is really important. So I'd like to suggest something along those lines.
Thank you. Dawn?
Yeah, I would just add in response to that, obviously CMT review this schedule, but the leader's quite right in the sense that actually there might be therefore another layer up from that, which is to put it to the portfolio holders meeting, executive session, so that there's a political overview of the information that's in there at the same time. And I just wanted to pick up on Councillor Rowley's comment about ongoing, because I think it depends how that word's utilised. And I think in that particular example, somebody's attempted to use it from a perspective, well, we're not closing it down, we're saying, but we've given you quite a bit of detail, as the chair referred to, in the actions taken. And I think it's kind of people getting used to using the format, etc. We've had an awful lot of churn at the top. Do you know what I mean? So the information changes according to who's presenting it as well. Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Myers.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. It's just to follow on from that. I think it sounds like one example is a motion that I put through full council, page 60. It's got ongoing actions. It's got actions without status. With lead officers and executive members, so in my view, muddled round. Some of the work could be done by officers. And for other motions in the pack, for example, writing to members of parliament about the council's position, that's generally done by officers, but it says it's stuck with executive members. So I think any additional review that's been described is welcome from me, because that's 8 months ago.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's all I'd like to say on that.
No, thank you. So if we just nip back to page 39. And we'll go through and I'll ask people to speak up if there are any sort of particular, I suppose either anything that's marked as completed that people vehemently think should not be regarded as such, or anything where there are any questions or comments. So page 40, 41, 42. Sorry.
There's different
Oh.
numbers. If you're online.
Okay. Sorry. I'm using the online PDF that has page numbers at the top.
Oh.
The reports pack rather than individual papers, so apologies.
Yes.
So we're in December 2022. Introduction of council tax premium on second homes. Councillor Merritt.
Yeah, I was slightly puzzled about the actions taken. Basically, it's saying that the levelling up regeneration bill has not yet been passed. And there's obviously comments here from the previous year and then a year later. But the act was actually passed in October 23. So this is factually incorrect, what's stated here.
Yeah, so this is the.
I mean, is it a regulation under the Act that hasn't been implemented or what? But the bill is no longer a bill, it's an Act.
Yeah.
And has been for 1.5 years.
Well, if it was October 23, yeah, so it's
Sorry,
8 months.
Yeah, sorry, 8 months, yeah.
Yeah, so we can feed that back, because we need to understand, is it the secondary regulations that are holding up implementation of those clauses in the Act? Good spot, thank you. So we're then on to care leavers transport costs. I think that's one that we have absolutely nothing, which I think does need some explanation, and it may be part of consideration on the work on the transport strategy. But if that's the case, I think that it would just be helpful to make that clear. Councillor Burton. Not really. We're not. Yeah, we're not really getting into the detail of.
Yeah, because I think that's quite worrying when we've got, we're responsible for the children in the care of the council.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, generally your parents would be able to afford a bicycle for you or, during your childhood. So I thought this was something that's quite important.
Yeah, and as you know, we have a wide variety of motions. Some are related to more sort of practical issues. Others are quite different. But regardless of the issue, there does need to be as members, we need assurance that the issue is being taken forward, even if the outcome is perhaps not one that the motion would have anticipated for various reasons. So, no, you're right to highlight the importance. The next one down, return to community policing. Again, we've got some blanks there. Councillor Waller.
Thank you, Chair. The motion has been proposed by a former colleague, ex-councillor Daubney, and those issues are still pressing. In fact, it's even more pressing because one of our PCSOs is leaving on Thursday, and ensuring that there is that connection between ward councillors and neighbourhood policing is vital, because that's something that, well, I'm certainly regularly stopped by people around and about asking for updates. So I'm sure that other councillors are asked the same. So it's ensuring that connectivity. Dare I say, things like Capable Guardian, which used to ensure partnership working. It's still a need for it. So it's
Thank you.
big gap.
I think one of the things that, again, we don't do often enough, and I include myself in that as chair of this committee, is to regularly go through all of the motions that have been through full council. Say, well, clearly there was a sufficient interest in the importance of this issue for it to be proposed and debated. How could and should we pick it up in the course of our scrutiny work? And taking that one as an example, further on, there's talk of the development of a refreshed community safety strategy, which I remember we talked about when I chaired the housing scrutiny committee, and we were always desperate to try and inform an updated community safety strategy. I never did, but I don't know where it's gone. And one of the kind of actions arising is, it proposed to bring this to council and executive and presumably scrutiny as well. So that's obviously that's a good outcome, but it's then a case of, well, which scrutiny committee would that sit with? It'll, I would imagine, be children, culture and communities. I think that's where community safety now sits. So there's a recommendation and action for chairs and vice chairs of scrutiny committees to go through this and pick anything out that, if we pursue it, it would help to deliver the outcomes of the motion. Councillor Rowley.
Again, just to highlight, I know that it seems like I'm being kind of nitpicking, but I'm really not. You know, whilst you could argue the actions box can be blank for very obvious reasons, there seems to be no reason why a status block or a status box should be blank. Because look, anybody looking at that, any member of the public looking at that would think it's just been tossed aside and no one's doing anything with it. Because not only is the actions boxes not full, but even the status boxes are empty. So it's just really, we need to make sure that when and I know, Chair, you're challenging on this. You know, when a motion comes through, we've got to have some way of ensuring that it doesn't get put on the back burner or even be seen or perceived as being put on the back burner. And like I say, the status boxes should have something in it. Whoever's provided this report, to me, there should be something in the status box, even if it's not sure what's happening.
Dawn, yes.
Sorry, just to comment on that, to be clear. So the report is in my name, but the annex is by no means my work, right? For a fact. However, no, I didn't take it as a personal criticism at all. I'm just commenting that because it's a collective document that is input, you know, across the council by directorates across the council. I entirely, at a personal level, agree with you. It shouldn't be beyond the wit of man to complete the status column or even to complete something in the actions taken. I am thinking, because we have had several years at trying to achieve this and to achieve completion of it since we started, I say several years, 3 years probably since we started doing it and bringing it to CSMC. You know, the leader's suggestion to take it up a notch and to have a regular periodic update, perhaps, at portfolio holders, I think will do a world of good towards engagement, shall we say. Because what you need is collective engagement. Because there are patches in this document, again, where you've got some engagement and other patches where you haven't got the kind of engagement you want, which is a simple status update, actually.
I mean, I think it's a bit sad, to be honest, that it should take escalation.
Yes.
Because it suggests that, you know, regular councillor scrutiny members don't really count, which I'm sure is not the intention, but that's sometimes how it can come across, which is unfortunate.
I have to say, I'm a little bit perturbed at the not officers in capital letters in.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
why I again say, not my document.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
actually, it's not, again, beyond the wit of man to draft something on behalf of, you know, and then consult leaders and that be sent, so.
We know.
Not officers, anyway, but there you go.
Okay, so I'm kind of plodding on still on the 23rd of the 3rd, 23. But please do put your hand up and shout if there's anything you particularly want to draw attention to. I think Councillor Burton.
How do we know it's completed? How do we know it's completed, and how are people going back to check? It was this one thing that struck me, which was a good idea, was that students eligible for free school meals are able to use their allowances anytime during the school day and to agree to the rolling over of any unspent money to be used in the future. It's a fantastic idea, and it says it's completed, but do we know that's actually happening, and that it's, you know, I mean, it's in a way partly to do with this whole subject. You know, it's status completed, but is it completed, and is it
Happening.
then does it go back to how it was before, or then does it hopefully carry on in the way that the motion?
Yeah.
Just,
I suppose it goes back to, I mean, we don't ask for that level of reporting in terms of, yes, we've done it, we've ticked the box because it's happening for a year, but then it might revert back to how it was. But again, I suppose it comes back to us looking at this through a scrutiny perspective, saying, well, okay, that's happened. We need to keep an eye on it and see whether this is sustained or whether it was a one-off thing. But no, it's a valid sort of challenge in terms of, yeah, we do have to sort of take at face value what we're told, but it may not be as.
Yeah. I think I would just add to that, Chair, and say I think it's very difficult, you know, as a group of councillors or as 47 councillors, because that scenario potentially could apply to anything, any work of the council. And I think you would have to be very careful. So I would back the Chair up in terms of, you know, your job is to look at this through a scrutiny review lens. And there has to be a bit of good faith when, to some extent, you would honour absolutely everything that was ever done by an officer anywhere. So
I didn't mean it in a criticism.
I know you didn't. I'm just saying.
I just was, you know, how. So there's some really great motions, and it's just, you know, are they carried on once it's been completed? And
you have to.
I don't know how you can do. You
no,
that would be very difficult.
You have to assume at a given point. I think.
Yeah.
Completed is completed.
Councillor Waller.
Thank you, Chair. It's just in relation to the auto enrolment. It was an issue that was brought up at Westfield Governors that doesn't seem to be working in the way that it's suggested in this paragraph. So I would like an update on that, please.
So what was the date of that motion?
23rd of March.
23rd of March. That was a busy council meeting, wasn't it? Lots of motions. Okay. So the questions around the the robustness of the explanation. Okay. So we're now on to July 2023. Safeguarding York's future. I think the first one I think we do now begin full council with the wording that was agreed in terms of the climate emergency. So I think we can recommend that that's marked as completed. I remember that. Yeah, there's a few that needs following up. Then on to highways maintenance, that's also July. We've got some action taken, but no status for those. They look ongoing, but again, it'd be helpful to have either it's ongoing or completed, but it's one of those ones that'd just be helpful to have consistency. Getting York moving fairly, got nothing. But again, I think that's picked up by the transport strategy work, but again, it'd just be helpful for that to be just made clear. Response to food insecurity, quite a bit of detail there. Yeah, and that's the auto enrollment point that was picked up. Air quality, again, there's quite a, a good description, but no status. The get me home safely point that Councillor Myers raised. Okay, then we're into November. Recognising and supporting York's neurodivergent adults. Some updates, again, a bit lacking on status. The football motions largely completed. Work to improve mental health. Again, we've got some good descriptions and we've got status as well. Telephone network. No actions, but we've got an indication of the status. And then we're into March, so we'll give a bit of leeway with the March ones because they're fairly recent. So I think we're clear what, I know this is for information and for transparency purposes, but I think we're clear what we would like to see. And any support from executive members to put us in a better position in 6 months' time would be appreciated. But so this is not a new issue.
No.
Members have any further points to raise on that item? Councillor Taylor.
Just to say that I think it's good that this committee is on with it and keeping an eye on it. It's the first time I've ever seen this kind of report come through, despite its gaps.
Yeah.
I've not been on this committee that often now, but I think it's positive enough.
Yeah, you know, and it's just recognising, you know, where we are, but I think I would hope it should be relatively straightforward to resolve. I would hope. So. Yes, because we do spend a lot of time debating motions and amending them and doing all kinds of things. So it'd be nice to think that was time well spent. Okay, and thank you, Dawn, for guiding us through that. We now come to schedule of petitions. So this is again something that we receive every 6 months, listing petitions that have been received by the council through various channels. So our role in relation to this report is to monitor the progress and appropriateness of actions taken or actions planned. So I propose to do similarly with this paper. I suppose one thing to flag up initially, the council's constitution as currently drafted assumes that all petitions will come to this committee and we will decide what to do with them all. That has never really happened. So we are out of step with the constitution. As somebody who was involved in the recent review of the constitution, happy to take ownership of why we're in a position of having an element of the constitution that isn't reflected in the reality of how these petitions are handled. You want to say anything?
No, sorry. I don't think you're quite out of step. I think the constitution's ambiguous actually on the point, and it's a journey in the sense that the constitution says that a petition shall be referred to CSMC from council. The point that I frequently make is council is not the only route for anybody to submit a petition via. So petitions go direct into the authority, for instance, and an officer might receive a petition. And they will get, the idea is that they get logged within the directorates and the department, and then they appear at some point on the schedule, which is Annex B. Petitions can go straight to an executive member. We've had the odd one that's done that, and the exec member will then take those petitions through to a decision-making session. So I don't think it's that you're entirely out of step. I think there is some confusion in that sometimes at council, because the substantial number do get, are organised, if you like, by a ward councillor and are then taken through the council route. So then council will refer them to CSMC. So, and then they get just referred to CSMC, and it doesn't say what for specifically, but historically you are right, Chair, in the sense that CSMC and previous incarnations of CSMC have always agreed that it's not really for you to determine how to deal with those petitions, because you are not the action takers. You are there to monitor the process and review, the actions that are taken in relation to petitions to see if those actions have been substantial enough. Are they satisfactory for the purpose? Do you want to recommend, in inverted commas, because that's all you can do, anything else? So just to clarify slightly, you're not entirely out of step. It's just that there's an ambiguity across the authority as to how those petitions should be dealt with. And it is far too easy to say CSMC will deal with it, because actually you're not really dealing with it. No. But you're not able to, you don't have the authority to deal with it. You are a collective repository, if you like, and then actually, so what you've taken the view is that you will look at those petitions and comment on the actions that have been taken, as you say, or not, as the case may be, if you're satisfied with them. So I hope that helps a little bit.
Thank you. So we'll go through Annex B, just to, is it an annex? Is it relating to a specific or more general?
It's no general point.
Yeah.
Layered on top of the multitude of ways in which petitions can come into the council, there is a need for ward councillors to understand where on earth it's got to, over layering the infrequency of these meetings and the lesser frequency of full council meetings. If there is an event coming up to which you would like, as a ward councillor, to be able to capture resident views to input that into a decision, then there does need to be the transparency of understanding this petition has been collected for this purpose to go in ready for that executive member decision session, and therefore the system is capable of responding to that, and that ward councillors understand where it's got. Because at the moment, you can see where e-petitions have got to, but not the rest.
Yeah.
And so, I think this report at the moment is the only way of, unless an officer would respond directly to a member who submitted a petition, say, just to let you know, your petition will be considered at this executive member decision session, which will be making a decision on that topic or not on a related topic.
Yeah.
But that depends on the officer who the petition ends up with. And as a submitting member, you might not know where your petition has gone and who's got it and what they're going to do with it.
Correct.
Other than by reading this, and we're going to get it every 6 months.
Yeah. Or the other route into that at the moment would be, if it's one that you have submitted to full council and it's therefore got in the stack to get referred to CSMC, will be to contact Democratic Services, because we will farm those petitions out to the responsible directorate. So we could give you a contact at that point, but that is the only way at the moment you would collectively know.
Okay. It's something that we can think about. Councillor
That'd be
Whittington?
the recommendation that a system is implemented so that traceability is achieved.
I shall make a note of that. Councillor Widdowson?
It's more or less the same thing. Could we not just have a page on the website that said, this is the petition, this is the person, this is where it's up to? It's here. And could it just not be on the website and people could go and have a look at it, or is that too simple? It doesn't
Seems
have to wait
doable.
every so often,
Seems
does it?
doable, councillor Taylor.
I mean, that would be a positive move. I mean, could we at least have a recommendation that that's looked into?
Yeah.
And then maybe in a year's time, we can get an update report on it. Ignore the last bit.
No. Yeah. No, well, I think the point's well made about transparency, not just for the person who submitted the petition, which may be a member of the council, may not be, but for all those who signed the petition, so they can see, well, what it's been submitted to the council, either has it been escalated with relevant partners if it wasn't an issue that was within the council's gift to resolve. No, I think that's a very practical, hopefully achievable recommendation. So let's go through Annex B, starting on, with my page 80. We'll use the petition numbers on the left-hand column, 191. I suppose what I'm asking for is just by exception, is there anything that's closed that you believe shouldn't be closed, or anything that is remains open that you think actually has been dealt with and can reasonably be closed? So we'll work our way down. He's down to 195. So I suppose that's an example of where, we petitions submitted. The petition will be considered at an executive member decision session. It's been acknowledged, it remains open. That it's kind of a good example, I think, of a sort of description of where that's going. And I'd like to think that the e-petitioner would be advised when when the item would go to an executive member decision session, or maybe that's just
Well, the council scheme said they should be advised, and they will be advised by not the decision maker per se, the officer supporting that process, yeah.
Okay, as long as that happens,
Yeah.
that's fine. Okay, we're down to 196. 197. Mm, 198, 199. No, councillor Waller.
199. I would say that the petition was submitted in November 23 with a view to the 23 to 27 4-year cycle of estate improvement grant funding, but the reply is retrospective to discussions that were had beforehand. So I would implore that that's left open pending decision.
So this is about future housing improvement grant decisions. Are officers aware of, have you fed back to officers that, or is it you just noted it from having received the report?
Well, I think it's part of the issue of we've had more notice.
Yeah.
To track where petitions have got to, then when they get snagged, there's the opportunity to have a discussion with officers about why.
And I've just confirmed to Councillor Waller earlier that it's entirely appropriate for him to contact the relevant officer who is responsible for actioning that petition to ask those questions. But I take the point, had you had the opportunity or known what status it was at earlier on in a process, you would be able to do that at the appropriate time. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so we'll see what the outcome of those discussions are.
So, Chair, I think to speed things up, that includes 200, 201,
right,
and 206.
Okay.
In the same category, and
right.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, so we're moving Moving down the list. 204. $205. Bless you. 207. 208. Again, there's some similar to the discussion we just had around some of the council motions, some of the petitions will be picked up in potentially in future scrutiny items.
Yeah.
So again, it's just useful for us to be mindful of keeping them in sight. 211. 12, 13, 14. 15, 16, 17. Councillor Myers.
Thank you, Chair. On 217, the petition for an immediate sustainable ceasefire in Gaza, Israel. I think what the committee's asked to do is look at the process. And I think there's a missing element when this is quite clearly an urgent petition. I mean, I might say that having handed it in, but I think there is a separate category here. It's taken 2 months to get to this meeting since the petition was handed in for us to then recommend that it gets escalated. And I think whilst that might be a fair process in what we've got agreed, I ask you to maybe think about reviewing that, because on page 76 it says, do we consider that this is an appropriate action that's planned? And I don't. I'm generally dissatisfied that it's taken this long in what I regard as an urgent matter. So I'm asking for a review there. I mean, I don't accept that the council doesn't also agree with me. I clearly don't accept that, and that's why I'm saying it. This is an urgent matter, and it should have been dealt with before having to come to this committee.
Thank you. I think in terms of how things are dealt with, in terms of, I'm guessing we don't have a procedure that we could refer to, for example, if there was a petition that was clearly urgent in a time, you know, had a time, was time sensitive, a way in which it could be escalated. For, you know, we often say, you know, at planning, well, that can be delegated to chair and vice chair in consultation to take a view and to make a recommendation, which if necessary could be shared with members of the committee via correspondence. So I would like to think it would be possible for us to do that. I just wondered whether it's something that had arisen before, Dawn.
So you've got various options in terms of what you can do with petitions, in terms of, I mean, this all goes back to the ambiguity of the constitutional referral to CSMC is what I would say as well. There was a process in place in the past whereby council used to look at petitions that it considered rather significant itself. Some of you have been on council in the past will remember that. There were those that had that reached a number of, oh my God, was that a bird?
A pigeon. Pigeon.
Wants to come in and have a view. That exceeded 1,000 signatories, for instance, that went to council. One of your options as a committee is actually to consider whether you think something is significant enough you wish council to have a debate about it in itself. In this particular case, that unfortunately has fulfills the function of kicking it further into the distance again, which is the point that Councillor Myers is raising. And I think there is currently within those options that are available to this committee, there's a myriad of things you can do, but it doesn't alter the fact that there's still a delay if you read the letter of the law technically and say all petitions get referred to CSMC. Most of the ones that you've already just looked at, somebody has also already, because we have, in terms of the ones that come in via full council, Democratic Services have farmed those out to the relevant directorate. We will have done in that with this particular one, for instance.
Yeah.
So, and then the directorate seeks to take the appropriate action, put those milestones in place. So I'm reading that for the first time, basically, just as you are probably, okay? Because we've just had that conversation about your role, your assumed role being to review the action that's planned or has been taken. So now, because it appears that nothing has been done with that particular one and they're waiting for review from CSMC, perhaps because of the subject matter, I don't know, but I think, you know, you have options available to you, whether that is to refer that up to council, whether that's to ask CMT to take a particular view with it, etc.
Okay, so I suppose there's two things. There's a recommendations in relation to this item and a more general point around how we deal with petitions that are particularly time sensitive or urgent in the view of members. Councillor Healy.
Thank you, Chair. I was just going to say, if the action taken or proposed action is, this will be reported to the next available corporate services, climate change and scrutiny management committee. We're here and we're looking at this now. Why don't we just have a discussion and take a vote on with a recommendation that it be escalated to the leader of the council for consideration? So picking up Councillor Myers' point, it moves it on. So, because we're not going to meet again for another month, it may not come to us for another month, another 2 months. And yeah.
I mean, I'm.
And the point I previously made is you're not decision makers. You cannot take any actions yourselves. Hence the point about reviewing any actions taken by others.
Yeah. Councillor Healy.
It says here, with a recommendation that it be escalated to the leader of the council for consideration. So this action here is making a recommendation to this committee. I presume then we agree with that recommendation or disagree with it. So I'm just saying, why don't we just agree or disagree with the recommendation and move it on?
So as I said, there are sort of two issues here. I mean, what this is highlighted is, you know, if there were 5 months until we were next due to receive this report, you could be waiting 5 months. But what's not clear to me is whether, if this report wasn't due for another 5 months, would it come as a separate agenda item to the next available CSMC or not? Because then I think that's my worry, is that, you know, if the answer is, well, it'll come in 5 months' time when you receive your biannual report of petitions. So that's the area that does agree with what you said.
No.
But it's the other part of the equation, which is, well, going forward, how do we make sure that we, you know, where things do come to us for a recommendation, it comes either to our next meeting, or if there is a delay, some mechanism through which chair and vice chair in consultation with other members can agree more quickly.
Yeah, and I think that's something you probably need to pick up on in your recommendations in terms of how we look at how we plug that gap and put something in process to make sure that, because this report, you're absolutely right, Chair, would not pick that up directly, because this is doing an overall monitoring of petitions received, and so it wouldn't have picked it up.
Yeah.
And we've not had it specifically referred to this committee as an item in itself.
Okay. I'm really sorry, I can't take contributions from the floor at this meeting. We have a, I'm really sorry, I can't.
Explain to the gallery here, some of your jargon, CSMC.
Sorry, yeah, my fault. So this committee is the Corporate Services Scrutiny Committee, which we sometimes refer to as CSMC shorthand. So that's who we are. So I apologies for using the jargon. So
And are you able to now refer it to council? For
So
debate?
we're coming to that discussion now. So the recommendation that's before us is that the matter be escalated to the leader of the council for consideration. It's been proposed by Councillor Healy that that we approve that recommendation, and I'd look to colleagues for views. Councillor Taylor.
Seconded.
Okay. Could I see all members who would be supportive of that recommendation, please? Okay. So we're agreed on the next step. Dawn's right in terms of, you know, within the scope of this report, there isn't an opportunity to come up with an approach that would prevent delays in future. But I think we do need to. I'll bring you in a moment. Sorry. I do think it's something that we need to think about, whether it's through the ongoing review of the Constitution or sort of tweaking the tools that are available to us as a committee, so that at least we have in our kind of toolkit the ability for chair and vice chair in consultation with members to approve a recommendation more quickly. Councillor Douglas.
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to clarify for those that wouldn't know that I'm here as a attendee. I'm not a voting member, so hence I didn't vote on that proposal. Thanks.
No, yeah, thank you for clarifying. Councillor Merritt.
See if we can get that one resolved. Can we formally agree to refer the issue and our concern to the Constitutional Working Group? And in the meantime, can we agree that the chair and the vice chair agree to consult members if there is something urgent, an urgent petition to be looked at?
I'm happy with that. Yeah. Okay. Thank you for that. Okay. So moving along, we're down to 218. Two or 9, 220, which is the last one. So are there any other issues arising from the review of petitions? No, thank you. So we've got one item to go, which is work plan, which shouldn't take too long. Do members want to have a quick break before we have that item, or are you happy to crack on? Shall we crack on? Okay. So agenda item 7, scrutiny work plan. So you'll see on that page we have agendas for this meeting and the next meeting of health, housing and adult social care. All of the other committees are busily considering their work plan for the coming municipal year. Before we talk about CSMC work plan, I can just ask Councillor Taylor and Councillor Myers just to give us a kind of quick update on how it's going, or any issues you've encountered, or any successes you'd like to tell us about. Councillor Taylor, you
Thanks, Chair. I mean, we're on with it. We've got a long list of items. The committee's got a very wide remit, which is makes it a bit of a nightmare because everyone's got their important topic, and fitting it in isn't, easy. But I'm hoping that in the next committee's papers, which will be published, I think on the 17th, there'll be a more populated work plan, which will be a development from the provisional, very rough and largely empty one shared last month. Waiting on feedback from officers on a variety of the suggested items and steer on useful dates to have certain discussions, because we want to get as much use out of them as possible. I've politely chased. I think I've had 1 or 2 in today. So hopefully we'll have something useful to look at next week's meeting. But thanks to members of that committee for their feedback and input too.
Yeah. No, thank you for your diligence in pursuing those items. Councillor Myers, how are you doing with
Yeah, thank you, Chair.
housing?
Similarly, it's a busy committee covering health, housing and adult social care, and we tried to split our meetings into 3 separate areas to work with officers and directors to get the best out of that time, focusing on one of the 3 areas. I think that's worked generally quite well, slotting in urgent items where it has been necessary. We've had 2 topic meetings a couple of times, but 2 directorate area meetings chunked into one. We got a draft work plan which is published with items running up for the next 5 meetings. So another busy 6 months scheduled for that committee. We've got one ongoing task group which is led by myself and vice chair and 1 member from the committee, with a view to reporting in 2 to 3 months on that task group. So yeah, I think it's working as best as it can do as a big committee.
Great.
Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. So we don't have the chair of children, culture and communities on this committee, but I know that they did have a single item meeting last week where they focused solely on the work plan. So I would hope, imagine, expect that they would have made some progress in.
They did populate it, Jess.
Oh, good. Oh, well, that's a nice thing. I know one of the things that scrutiny chairs are aware of, and certainly I'm aware of, once we've pulled together our outline work plans, is then engaging with officers to ensure that it hangs together and makes sense from a sort of an officer resource perspective, and where we can move things around where appropriate to make it more likely that officers will be able to provide the information that we need in order to have a sort of a meaningful discussion and debate. We can do that in a way that makes best use of officers' time. I know we've tried to do that, and we'll continue to try to do that as best we can. In terms of this committee, we, as with most other committees, we receive items that come to us as a matter of course, and they'll be plugged into the work plan. There are also some items that have arisen in the course of our recent discussions at these meetings, and just to capture some of those, we talked about social value policy in the context of a discussion on procurement, and the offer was made to bring a draft social value policy back to this committee to review. So that will be factored in to our work plan. In the context of our most recent discussion on climate change, we talked about carbon offsetting and insetting, and the development of a strategy for the authority on that, which again we'll plug in to discuss. We will receive the annual complaints and compliments report that comes to this committee annually. In terms of our climate change remit, we haven't really engaged with the York Climate Change Commission in terms of in its new form, and that's something that could perhaps provide an item for discussion when we have a suitable slot on the agenda, because it's not something that we've looked at in terms of how the new commission with the various working groups, how that is working and how that's contributing towards the achievement of the strategies that we discussed earlier on. So I think that was something that would be worthy of discussion. There will be some discussion and some work arising out of the corporate improvement framework that was subject to an executive report last week, and on which I know there is already some outward facing comms. I think it would be helpful, probably not in this discussion, but for myself and the vice chair to have a discussion with either officers or executive members around how it's envisaged that members and scrutiny committees will feed into that work. We've tentatively penciled in something for the July agenda of this committee around corporate improvement framework and any other issues arising from the LGA peer review, because there was a line in the peer review that says, I wrote it down, scrutiny arrangements would benefit from a review. So that gives us scope for looking at what we do, how we do it, and the value of it. So I would imagine that would be, I'm not sure whether that's something that is featured in the corporate improvement framework or would be a separate piece of work, but it's something that I think, as the Corporate Scrutiny Management Committee, I would expect us and anticipate we would have an opportunity to take part in those discussions as the people who are doing the scrutiny, to discuss what works well, what could work better. So that's tentatively penciled in for July, alongside a discussion on workforce development, which was due to come back to us in July anyway. In terms of June's meeting, we'll be having a discussion about York's pipeline of proposals for the combined authority, which is all the more real now. We have a combined authority with an elected mayor, so this is our opportunity to discuss the pipeline of projects that we would hope to be supported. So we're due to have that discussion in June, and then another discussion in July, which will bring together feedback from the other scrutiny committees who will be having similar discussions as well. So what we'll put that together in an outline timetable and circulate that around to members of this committee for review and for comment, and just to see how that aligns with some of the emerging work plans from other committees. Sorry?
Sorry.
Okay.
Sorry.
No, that's fine.
The leader was wanting to.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Yeah. So I'll send that round in its sort of skeletal format and invite comments and suggestions from members, particularly around the committee's responsibilities around climate change. We've had a number of largely exploratory discussions up to now, and I think that if there are particular issues that members would welcome further discussion on, then we can have that. Councillor Douglas.
It was just on the timing for corporate improvement framework, if the committee wanted to have any input. I think it's due to come to my decision session, the action plan in July. So you might want to just check with Claire Fole as to when it would be best for you to do that section if you want to have input. But the scrutiny review, she said, can be an external, another piece of work.
Okay.
That's separate to that.
Okay, no, that's helpful, because our next meeting of this committee is on the 10th of June, which might be a bit soon. Our July meeting is on the 8th, so we can see where that falls in relation to your decision session. Yeah, okay. So we can have a look at that, Jane. Anything else anybody wants to raise under work plan? Councillor Burton?
Did we look at the blue badge application process in this meeting, or was it any?
We did look at.
It was here, wasn't it?
Blue badge application process, and I think we received quite a detailed report in terms of some work that was ongoing to look at the mechanics of the process and how sort of users were being service users were being engaged.
And we sort of left it to them to get on with things, and I wondered if it was possible to check how they're getting on with things. As rather than going to a huge big,
Yeah,
yeah.
I think, Chair, from memory, you did ask them to come back to the committee as well.
Yeah.
I think. So we could check what timeline we scheduled that for.
Yeah.
I think.
It is, I think it's some months still.
Yes.
So-
it
Yeah,
was some-
yeah.
Yes, right.
okay, no,
Thank you.
that's helpful, thank you.
Sure, thanks.
Sorry, councillor Myers next, then I'll bring.
Thank you, Chair. For the work plan, the standby policy, I've written to you and you responded as well, so I thank you for that. But I wrote to you formally as chair of the Health, Housing, Adult Social Care Committee. We discussed it in committee with officers. The standby policy being the out of hours terms and conditions for the workforce. When discussing it with officers, we agreed as a committee that we wanted to have an item on our agenda, but they suggested bringing it to this committee because it covers more than just HHASC. And it's largely relevant for the housing directorate, but there are other areas, so that's why they've suggested to send it here to corporate. It's a really important one for me because the last time the standby, I understand when it was last updated, it wasn't agreed and consulted on with the 3 recognised trade unions, and that for me is, you know, makes it legally questionable, and I want that to happen this time. And in order for us to get to that position, I think members would be interested in it on this committee. So that's my request outlined. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you for that. I think given that we've got Helen Whiting due to come on the 8th of July for the workforce development item, on the assumption that the review of the standby policy is not due to be concluded by that point, would you be happy for me to approach Helen and ask that when she comes to talk to us about workforce development on the 8th of July, that item is picked? Sorry, you can't leave that way. Sorry, it has to be that way. Yeah, sorry. If I liaise with Helen and see if she's agree, well, say that as a committee we would like to have that discussion at that meeting, provided it won't be too late to inform any decisions that are being made.
That'd be really good. You
Okay.
could do that, please.
Are people happy with that? Okay. Councillor Widdowson.
It was just a minor point building on from what Councillor Burton said. My understanding from the conversation was that we were setting up a small working group. My understanding, Councillor Burton, was that you would be invited to that group and that you would come back and tell us what they'd done. That's what I thought was happening last time.
I think there was a group of service users. I think that was part of the kind of action plan, and this is from months and months ago. We can check. Unless your recollection is better than mine.
Yeah, I don't remember it being that. I think they were going to go off and carry on doing what they were doing, but mindful of what we'd said to them, rather than put a direct. It's the procedural thing that, and I was very new then, and Councillor Taylor might remember more better than I do. So, but
Councillor Taylor.
All I can recall is that they were on with a list of actions, and then someone suggested, we could set up a task and finish group to look at this more. And then I said, what's the point when you're already doing lots of stuff? You know, a task and finish group will just add another layer and more time.
Yeah.
And at that time, this committee sort of nodded and was like, yeah. And that was the direction of travel. But whether if the position's changed, it's changed. But hopefully they've got on with the things that they said that they were doing, because it was quite an extensive list.
It was, and I think certainly there was your suggestion of there not being a task and finish group was welcomed by colleagues, because I think we were assured that there was already work in hand. But I think the point is well made that we can ask for an update on how that work is going. And I think involved in that, there was a sort of an expert panel or some sort, but yeah, I think it stopped short of the task and finish group. Okay, so in terms of, sorry. Obviously the option remains for members at any point in the cycle to put forward ideas for a task and finish group, using the templates that we have developed for members to complete. So that offer remains for members to put forward suggestions that we can take forward. Any other comments on work plan? No. Which brings us on to urgent business, of which we have none. So thank you for your attendance, and have a pleasant evening. Thank you.